Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive into a really singular event, the 1980 Cash Landrum incident.
Right. This wasn't just, a quick sighting in Texas.
No, not at all. This involved pretty serious claims of health problems, even damage to property, and it led somewhere really unusual for these kinds of stories.
The civil lawsuit against the U.S. government, no less.
Exactly. Makes this case stand out.
It really does. And because of that lawsuit and the investigations, there's actually a decent paper trail, which isn't always the case with UFO reports.
For sure. And our source material for this is the Wikipedia entry on the incident. It seems pretty comprehensive. Covers the key details, the claims, the counterclaims.
Yeah, it lays out the different perspectives that have built up over the years.
So our mission really is to pull out the crucial bits, try and connect the dots, and just get a better handle on what actually happened, or what people say happened.
Sounds good. So where do we start? The encounter itself, I guess.
Yeah, the core event. The Wikipedia entry puts it on the evening of December 29th, 1980, around 9 p.m.
Okay. And the people involved?
Betty Cash, she was 51, Vicki Landrum, 57, and her grandson, Colby Landrum, who was just 7 years old.
Right. And they were where? Driving somewhere.
Yeah, driving home near Dayton, Texas, on this pretty isolated road, 2 lanes through dense woods.
Okay, setting the scene. So what did they see first?
Initially, just a light above the trees. Their first thought, apparently, was it was maybe a plane heading for Houston Intercontinental. It was about 35 miles off.
Makes sense. Normal explanation first.
But then a few minutes later, driving down these back roads, they saw it again. And this time it was different.
How so?
Much closer, way brighter. And they described this huge diamond-shaped object hovering like treetop level.
Whoa. Okay, diamond-shaped. That's specific. Did they say what it looked like beyond the shape?
Yeah, they did. Dull metallic silver, like an upright diamond. And they gave a sense of scale about the size of the Dayton Water Tower.
That's big.
Huge. Flat top and bottom. Small blue lights, kind of around the middle. And then flames shooting at the bottom, like a big cone of fire.
Flames. Okay, that's intense.
Intense is the word. They mentioned the heat, said it was significant. So much so that the metal body of their car got painfully hot.
Really?
Yeah, Betty Cash said she had to wrap her coat around her hand to even touch the door handle.
Wow. And didn't Vicki Landrum say something about the dashboard?
She did. Claimed the heat softened the vinyl dashboard so much that when she put her hand on it, it left an imprint. Apparently, you could see it afterwards.
Huh. That's a very physical detail.
It really is. Now, their reactions were interesting and different. Vicki Landrum was apparently quite religious.
Yes, the entry mentions that.
She interpreted it as, believe it or not, a sign of the second coming.
Yeah.
Told Colby, her grandson, that's Jesus, he will not hurt us.
Trying to make sense of it, I suppose. Frame it in a way that's understandable, even comforting in a terrifying situation.
Yeah, maybe. Betty Cash, though, she was just anxious. Thought about turning the car around.
But she didn't.
No. She was worried, apparently, about getting stuck. It had rained, and the shoulders of the road were soft dirt, so they felt kind of trapped moving forward.
Okay. Did they stay in the car the whole time?
Not entirely. Betty and Vicki actually got out for a bit to get a better look.
Brave. Or maybe curious.
Maybe both. But Colby was terrified, understandably. So Vicki quickly got back in to comfort him.
And Betty?
Betty stayed outside. The source mentions Jerome Clark wrote she was sort of mesmerized by the bizarre sight, just watching it.
Wow. And the object itself, was it just hovering there?
It was moving, but strangely.
Yeah.
They said when the flames died down, it would sort of float down close to the road. Then when the flames blasted out again, it would rise up.
Like it was controlling its altitude with the flames. Or maybe struggling.
Hard to say. It sounds very unstable, almost.
Mm-hmm.
But then it ascended, went up above the trees, higher, and that's when the helicopters showed up.
Right, the helicopters. This is a really key part of their story. A lot of them.
A lot. They counted 23.
23. Seriously, that's practically an air show.
Yeah. And they said they surrounded the diamond object in a tight formation.
Did they recognize the type of helicopters?
They did. They identified some as tandem rotor Chinooks, you know, the big CH-47s.
Yeah, the military ones?
Exactly. Betty Cash even claimed she saw United States Air Force markings on them.
Okay, that's a very specific and potentially verifiable claim.
If it were true, yeah. The whole thing, from seeing the first light to the object and helicopters leaving, they said lasted about 20 minutes.
20 minutes? That's a long time for such an intense encounter.
It really is. Now, we should mention, The Wikipedia entry notes, Robert Schieffer pointed out some possible discrepancies in their exact location description later on.
Mm-hmm. How does that muddy the waters, do you think?
Well, it's a point skeptics raise, right? Does it mean the whole memory is flawed? Or just that they were confused about exactly which back road they were on during a pretty traumatic event? Hard to say for sure.
Fair enough. But the really disturbing part comes next, doesn't it? The health problems.
Yeah, this is central to the whole case. The entry says that same night, all three of them started feeling sick.
What kind of symptoms?
Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, feeling really weak, burning eyes, and feeling like they had a bad sunburn.
Sounds almost like radiation exposure or some kind of chemical thing.
That's what gets debated. For Betty Cash, it apparently got much worse over the next few days.
Oh, so?
She developed these large, painful blisters. Couldn't walk. When she went to the hospital ER a few days later, January 3rd, she had lost patches of skin, clumps of hair.
Oh, man. That's severe.
Yeah, the entry says she was in the hospital for 12 days initially, then went back for another 15. There was even documentary footage showing her hair loss. Doctors apparently thought burns at first, maybe then radiation sickness.
Yeah.
She was later treated for cancer, too.
And the Landrums, Vicky and Colby.
They had issues, too, though maybe less severe. Lingering weakness, skin sores, some hair loss for both. And Vicky developed a cataract in one eye a few months later, April 81. Betty also developed breast cancer later in 83. The entry notes neither condition was known before the incident.
Okay, so you have these reported symptoms. What do the experts or the investigators say about them?
Well, it's complicated. Brad Sparks, who looked into it, is quoted saying the symptoms have some similarities to radiation sickness, but the onset was too fast for the dose not to have been lethal very quickly.
Meaning, if it was radiation strong enough to cause those symptoms that fast, it likely should have killed them sooner.
That seems to be his point, yeah.
Yeah.
He floated an alternative idea, maybe some kind of chemical contamination, like an aerosol.
Any evidence for that?
That's mentioned here. And Gary Posner, another voice in the entry, he agrees with Sparks that the radiation explanation seems unlikely for the rapid onset. But he expresses myriad reasons for skepticism of virtually every aspect of the case.
Strong words. What specifically?
He points to apparent inconsistencies in Betty Cash's medical records from that first hospital stay, specifically about the hair loss and skin issues.
What inconsistencies?
Apparently, according to Schussler, the investigator who documented them, her doctor initially noted very little hair loss when she was admitted, though it definitely developed later. So there's discrepancy between the initial medical observation and maybe the later recounting of the severity right at the start.
Okay, so that definitely adds fuel to the skeptical fire. What about other inconsistencies? The shape description, maybe?
Yeah, that's mentioned too. It seems like right after it happened, Betty and Vicky were maybe a bit vague on the exact shape. But then later, about 8 months later, during an interview at Bergstrom Air Force Base, that's when Betty drew a clear diamond shape, signed it, and Vicky agreed, adding the flames. Though interestingly, Colby, the 7-year-old, apparently did say it looked like a diamond right away.
Memory consolidation, suggestibility, or just getting clearer over time. Who knows?
Exactly. Then there's another weird helicopter incident mentioned.
Separate from the main event.
Yeah, this was months later, April 1981. A Chinook helicopter landed in Dayton, and apparently Colby got really upset seeing it.
Understandable, maybe, given the previous experience.
Right. So Vicky took him to see it on the ground, talked to the pilot, and the pilot supposedly said something about checking on a UFO in trouble near Huffman.
Whoa. That sounds like a direct link.
Well, maybe not. It was later clarified, apparently, that the pilot was referring to a completely different event from way back in July 1977. So likely just a misunderstanding or a coincidental comment misinterpreted.
Ah, okay. Less exciting then. Any other corroborating witnesses? For the helicopters, at least.
There was one. A Dayton police officer, Lamar Walker, and his wife, Marie. They came forward later in May 82.
What did they see?
They said they saw about 12 Chinook-type helicopters in that same area on the same night as the Cash Landrum incident.
12. Still a lot.
Yeah.
Did they see the diamond UFO?
No.
Yeah.
No UFO.
That's...
But they did say one or more of the helicopters had a bright light shining down.
Okay, so that supports the helicopter part of the story, at least the presence of Chinooks in the area, but not the strange object itself.
Pretty much. Which brings us to the aftermath, the investigations, and that lawsuit.
Right, the $20 million lawsuit against the government. How did that come about?
They contacted their senators, Lloyd Benson and John Tower, who advised them to file a formal complaint. That process eventually led to the lawsuit. They were seeking damages for their injuries, basically.
And the government's response?
Denial. Officials from NASA, the Air Force, Army, Navy, they all testified. Said no government agency had a craft like that, and none were operating those helicopters there and then. Flat-out denial.
So the court case?
Dismissed. In August 1986, the judge ruled there was no proof any government agency was involved or responsible. Big setback for them.
I bet. But the story didn't go away, did it? Media must have picked it up.
Oh, yeah. Tabloids, but also mainstream stuff.
Yep.
The entry list shows like, that's incredible. Unsolved mysteries, sightings, even a segment called UFO Cover-Up Live.
Yeah.
Colby was on UFO Hunters much later, too.
It definitely became a classic case in UFO lore. Sadly, the main witnesses aren't with us anymore.
No. Betty Cash died in 1998, actually on December 29th, the 18th anniversary of the incident. Vicki Landrum passed away in 2007.
Wow, the anniversary. That's eerie. What about official investigations, besides the court case testimony?
Well, Vicki Landrum contacted NASA initially. That brought in John Schuessler, who was affiliated with MUFON, the UFO group. Alan Hendry from CFOS also looked into it briefly.
And the military, given the helicopter claims?
Yes, there was an Army investigation in '82, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Sarin. His conclusion, no evidence linking the helicopters to the U.S. military. But he apparently found the witnesses credible. Betty, Vicki, Colby, and also Officer Walker and his wife said they didn't seem to be exaggerating.
So, credible witnesses, but no proof of military involvement or a UFO. That's unsatisfying.
Deeply unsatisfying, which leaves room for all sorts of theories, right?
Like what skeptical explanations are out there?
Well, Stuart Campbell suggested it might have been a mirage of the star Canopus, believe it or not.
A mirage causing heat burns and making a car dashboard melt seems unlikely.
Yeah, that one feels like a stretch. Philip Glass, the well-known skeptic, he focused on the lack of radioactivity found later.
Right. Schuessler checked the car and the site, didn't he?
Yeah, and found nothing. Glass argued a real radiation event intense enough to cause those symptoms should have left traces. He also pointed out the lack of baseline medical data for them before the incident.
That's a fair point, too. Hard to prove something caused a condition if you don't know their health status beforehand.
The Texas Department of Health also checked for radiation later and found nothing, though they did add the caveat that some types of radiation wouldn't leave residual traces, so it's not entirely conclusive.
Still, the lack of physical evidence is a major hurdle for the extraordinary claims.
Absolutely. Peter Brooksmith called the whole thing baffling and frustrating, questioning their prior health, too.
And more recently, any newer takes?
Brian Dunning covered it on Skeptoid in 2018. He suggested Betty Cash's hair loss might have been alopecia areata, an autoimmune thing, and her other issues may be from a pre-existing illness she wasn't aware of.
And Vicki Landrum.
He noted her only really documented issue afterwards was the cataract, which can have many causes.
Yeah.
His hypothesis basically was that they genuinely experienced something weird, but mistakenly blamed that event for health problems that might have had other causes, possibly exaggerating details while seeking compensation.
Plausible, maybe, but impossible to prove now. It feels like we're left where we started, almost.
Pretty much. The Wikipedia entry sums it up, quoting Texas Monthly. To this day, there is no conclusive explanation of the night's events, still a genuine mystery.
Yeah. So we've got this incredibly vivid story from 3 witnesses. A bizarre object, intense heat, strange movements, military helicopters.
Followed by really serious health problems. Serious enough to prompt that unprecedented lawsuit against the government.
But then you have the official denials, the lack of physical evidence like radiation, inconsistencies in some accounts, and plausible, though unproven, alternative explanations for the health issues.
It just hangs there, doesn't it? Decades later, still no definitive answer. What did they see? What made them sick?
The contrast is stark. You have the witnesses who stuck to their story, seemingly genuinely traumatized, and then you have the wall of official denial and scientific skepticism. It really highlights how hard it is to verify something so far outside normal experience.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads to our final thought for you, the listener. When you have accounts like this detailed, distressing, consistent in the core elements, even deemed credible by an investigator, but they clash so strongly with official statements and lack that concrete physical proof, what does it tell us?
Yeah, what does the Cash Landrum incident suggest about how we handle phenomena that just don't fit? Does it point towards truly unknown things, maybe secret government activity that obviously deny, Or does it show more about the fallibility of memory, perception, and the difficulty of proving cause and effect, especially when health and high stress are involved?
It leaves you wondering about the limits of knowing, really, and the challenge of finding truth when personal trauma, extraordinary claims, and potential official secrecy all collide.